What's up, guys? This is Darreck with the Dallas Prospect, back again to talk a little bit about something I wrote about the other day. We're going to be looking at the balance of Ezekiel Elliott and whether or not he can be used more dynamically to be a player kind of the same flavor of Le'Veon Bell from Pittsburgh. Now, in the article, I detailed how, Le'Veon Bell, he has tremendous all-around potential in his game. There's a reason in his contract negotiations he's wanting to be paid as both a running back and a receiver. And that simply is because he puts up numbers from both. Now, if you look at his per-game rushing numbers, they don't jump off the page. His career average is about 86 yards a game, which, that's serviceable. That's nothing spectacular by any means. But he adds in another, I want to say 43, 44 yards receiving on average a game as well. And for his career, he has over 5,500 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns. Now that is what I like. That pops off the page a little bit. And this was clearly on display in 2016 when Dallas went to Pittsburgh, when you saw him beat Wilcox, J.J. Wilcox, off the line. Pittsburgh lined him up wide, got him singled up on Wilcox. He made a nice cut, got inside of Wilcox, snatched the ball out of the air with great hands. That is what I want to see more of from Dallas. I want to see Zeke used in a similar fashion, but Dallas doesn't do that. They just don't. I wish they would. If they would just do it one time. Give me 1 or 2 looks a game like that. I promise you, you can see similar results. Zeke has good hands. We've seen Zeke with one hand snatch the ball out of the air. He's got the hands. He has the speed, the burst, the acceleration, and the power. The problem is with how Dallas uses him one-dimensionally, all they do is run him between the tackles or they run him on a counter, maybe a sweep if they feel exotic. It's very one-dimensional. They are a very traditional offense. And frankly, I think it limits what they can do. Now, we know, Jason Garrett came in 2007 as the offensive coordinator, and by 2010, he became the interim head coach. We've had him ever since as the head coach. So even though we've had a Bill Callahan and a Scott Linehan come through now, it's still running philosophically Jason Garrett's offense. Now, 3 of those seasons with Jason Garrett as head coach, they were a little bit of a different flavor because those were the 3 8-8, 8-8, 8-8 seasons. And in those, you saw Dallas without any kind of offensive line help, any kind of running back help, and you basically saw Tony Romo getting murdered week in, week out. And that's where a lot of the unfortunate and frankly ridiculous Tony Romo hate came from. And people kind of like to revise that history a little bit and act like Romo was always as good as we saw in the 2014 season and all of that. He's not. And the fact that we didn't get more Romo like that, the reason we don't have Tony Romo today is because of those 3 8-8 seasons where we built the team so poorly. Romo suffered broken collarbones, fractures in his back, 3 back surgeries. It's a mess. I digress nevertheless. Dallas runs the 90 style offense from the dynasty years. And the reason for that, it is effective. It can be effective. If Dallas invested $100 million on this offensive line, over $100 million on this offensive line as it stands today, they still haven't even paid from his rookie deal, Zach Martin. So that number is only going to go up. And when you invest in that, your thinking is that you can plug in any running back in that backfield and get an effective game plan. We found out in 2015 that wasn't the case. We let DeMarco Murray walk, and when we plugged in Darren McFadden, yes, he didn't really see, consistent starts until week 6 after the Joseph Randle situation blew up, but nevertheless, he still ran for 1,089 yards, but only 3 touchdowns. He was 5th in the league in total rushing yards, but you saw that they weren't really impactful yards. He had a few times where he broke a big run, but he could never quite cap it off. Most notably, that Green Bay game that year. So what this taught Dallas was, okay, we need to go out. We already have the offensive line. The philosophy isn't to re-sign a guy like DeMarco Murray, who at that point was going to be 27, 28 years old, starting that new deal with all that wear and all those injuries in his past. Instead, you would get a ready, NFL-ready caliber running back coming out of the draft, someone in the first round, in Dallas's case, the number 4 overall pick, who you could plug in now without the mileage and without the injuries, but could still be a dynamic playmaker. Zeke was that in spades. As a rookie, he ran for over 1,600 yards. Would have set the all-time rookie record for a single season, probably, had it not been for Dallas having nothing to play for in their Week 17 matchup at Philadelphia. As a result, Dallas never really tweaked the formula. You saw a couple times where they would line him up at receiver, but they never threw the ball to him. In terms of the passing game, the only plays you ever see Zeke break are checkdowns or screens. At Pittsburgh, 2016, you saw Zeke take an 83-yard dump pass, just a little check down, 83 yards to the house to get Dallas back into that game. Until that play, Dallas had done nothing on the day. They were looking at 3rd and long. They were dead in the water. Pittsburgh had just scored and was about to force a 3 and out, and you just felt that an avalanche was coming. Zeke made moves in space and he accelerated down the sideline. Yes, he had good blocking out in front of him as well, but he showed the kind of explosive finish to a run that you don't see, you never saw in Dallas, at least, out of Darren McFadden. Frankly, that not even DeMarco Murray oftentimes produced. So moving forward from that, last year, Zeke's sophomore year, you saw a similar situation at San Francisco. Now, this wound up being a ass whooping by the Dallas Cowboys, but you saw Zeke take a screen and go 70 yards to the house for a touchdown. This was another huge play from Zeke, another just trot down the sideline, accelerating and leaving everyone in his dust. He did, I believe, stiff arm a guy on the way, though, so he showed off some of that power. But aside from those 2 plays, if you take those 2 out, and in my article on the DallasProspect.com, I actually broke that down. Zeke, for his career, granted, we're talking 25 games over the course of 2 years. He missed 7 games, 6 because of suspension last year, and he sat out essentially after the first drive of the 2016 finale at Philadelphia. So, we saw in 25 games, Zeke has 58 receptions. If you take out those 2 game-breaking receptions wherein Zeke did everything on the play, you're looking at 56 catches. And that sounds good, right? 56 catches in 25 games. That sounds awesome. But what you saw is that he averages 25 receiving yards per game for his career. Now, that Pittsburgh game really skewed those numbers because he did it all in that game. Never lined up at receiver, but a lot of his impact, or his 200 total yards, a lot of his impact came from that receiving game. But then again, when you pop one for 83, that's going to be the case most of the time. So, you saw those numbers and you take them out. You take those 2 huge runs out. His average changes from 25 yards a game receiving to 19, barely 19 yards a game receiving. And his average drops off significantly. If you look at Le'Veon Bell, meanwhile, who Pittsburgh will line up 2, 3, sometimes 4 times a game at receiver. They did twice in 2016 against Dallas. Once for that beautiful touchdown I mentioned earlier against J.J. Wilcox, and another late in the game where they got about a 25-yard gain in the final minute when they were driving for what they thought was the game-winning touchdown. Le'Veon Bell averages 43 yards receiving a game for his career. And those numbers, as you can imagine, are already close to double Zeke currently. But then when you factor in taking out those 2 home run hits Zeke got off of just little dump passes, little checkdowns where he was 3-4 yards away from Dak, it's a significant difference. And it's because Pittsburgh understands what I want Dallas to understand. If you have an elusive running back with great speed and agility, the best thing you can do is get him out in open space. Now, Dallas, yes, I get it. You want to be a brutish offense where you just hand the rock to your running back and he just punches the opposing defensive line in the mouth again and again until they stop being able to get up. I get it. It is savage out there. That's great. But every now and then, mix it up. What drives me nuts is when you see Dak drop back and then just dump off a little pass to Zeke, because now teams have seen it. They've seen 2 years of that, and they're sitting on it. You'll see a defensive end sit on Zeke, And Dak suddenly doesn't even have his safety valve checked down anymore. And on those, he'll usually throw the ball away, or he'll, eat a hit when he doesn't need to. Or another one that drives me insane is when you'll see the guy, the defensive end, not necessarily sit on Zeke, but he'll split the difference between Dak and Zeke because, as I said, they're standing no more than 4 or 5 yards apart. And as a result of that, you see crowded space where effectively both guys are taken out of the play. That's not good enough. That's not. You need to get creative. And again, my philosophy is not to take Zeke's strength running between the tackles and say, never run between the tackles again. Not at all. Not at all. I'm saying instead of focusing on getting Zeke 25 to 30 carries a game and absorbing immense punishment, all those dirty yards that Jason Garrett likes to talk about. He talked a lot about them in 2014 with DeMarco Murray late in the year when his number started to drop off a little bit in terms of per game average and touchdowns, particularly you saw at Philadelphia in 2014. When you look at those things, you can't just focus on that. Zeke's going to eat a lot of punishment. I don't want to take away what he does best. What I want to do is say, hey, instead of 25 to 30 carries a game, why not 20 to 25 and then 3 or 4 plays a game? We'll run you out into formation. Not only will we run you out into formation, we won't even do it at coming out of the huddle sometimes. Sometimes we'll line up and then Dak will call an audible. Zeke will go flank out wide on the end of the line like you saw Le'Veon Bell do against Dallas in 2016. And then suddenly you have a mismatch because someone is assigned to that running back. Someone is going to be forced then out into open space. And the NFL likes to pretend that it's still a traditional power game, that it's not college football, which is spread them out and take advantage of the mismatches, exploit the mismatches. Well, it's becoming more and more like that. And that's why you're seeing offenses kind of surging. Dallas needs to do this with Zeke. If you move him out, you're forcing a linebacker or in some cases a nickel corner out onto your best and most dynamic playmaker in open space. You're telling that guy, you by yourself, stop our running back, stop our guy. You know how many guys can take Zeke one-on-one in open space when he's not standing 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage already? It's not easy. It's not easy at all. And if Zeke already has momentum moving forward, as was the case with a slant or something like that, he's already better off. He's going to be running when he catches the ball, as opposed to these dump downs where he has to catch, gather, turn up field, and then process what's in front of him and then make his move. It's different. It's so much faster and more fluid. I understand Jason Garrett doesn't do this. And it's because the offense is still his traditional baby, where he doesn't want to do it. He wants to have the identity of a smash mouth football team. It's kind of like how I feel about Dallas saying we build our entire team through the draft, and anything we get in free agency or in, God forbid, a trade is going to be basically a league minimum stopgap. We're just going to plug in these little pieces. This is where you get your Stephen Paellas, your Nolan Carrolls, guys that never work out. It's ridiculous. You need to swing for the fences once in a while. Go trade for Earl Thomas. Or sign a guy like Richard Sherman. By the way, I'd much rather have Thomas of those two if you're going to give me one of them. It's a different philosophy. The way that you look at it on paper, you're like, what you're telling me makes sense, but it's not right as an absolute. It's a general philosophy, and you're treating it as if it's concrete truth set in stone, and I don't think that's the right philosophy. The problem with the way Garrett runs the offense, Dallas will come into a given week with a game plan involving 4 or 5 running plays and a small handful of passing plays. It's a very simplistic offense. In 2014, we celebrated that. In 2016, we celebrated that. And when you have the right pieces, it's easy to celebrate it. Dallas showed in 2016, even with, an average to a little bit above average when he's right in the head and when he's protected quarterback in Dak Prescott. As we saw in the second half of last year, when you get into his head and rattle him, which we saw at Atlanta and he was never right again, it's a different game. But you saw in 2016, you can win with a bruising running game and receivers winning at the line of scrimmage. Now, the problem is we didn't see much winning at the line of scrimmage last year. In fact, we saw next to none. And part of that is because Dallas, each receiver has about 3 to 4 routes in which they run. And so the guys guarding Dez, first of all, they know get physical with Dez at the line of scrimmage. He doesn't have blow you away speed, and he doesn't have his high point jump ball ability that he used to have. So if you press him at the line, 1, you're already throwing him off. 2, if you really still need another way to get into his head, just start trash talking, and sometimes he'll remove himself from the game. It's simple things like that. But Dez, when he has 2 or 3 routes, then it's easy to take him out. He's running a slant, or he's running a fade. He's running a comeback or a dig. It tells him all he needs to know with that. Same thing applied to all of them. And supposedly they addressed this with their new hiring of a receivers coach. They let Derek Dooley go, and they brought in Samjay. I'm not familiar with this name off the top of my head. I'm getting into the weeds again here. The point is, Dallas is a very simplistic offense, and we celebrate it in years that it works, but you got to have the right pieces and the right things happening in those years. Years like last year, it didn't work, and then you saw for the worst what happens with a simplistic offense. Teams and defenses will tee off against you again and again and again, and it only got worse as the season wore on. So I think the best thing Dallas can do is change up how they use Zeke. It's not much, but you change how you use your best player, and you can throw off an opposing team. You can throw off a defense. Throw Zeke out there at the end of the line of scrimmage. Have him run a wheel route once in a while. You create mismatches when you do that, and you give your team a chance to succeed. You give Dak a safety valve he can look for, not just a little dump-off pass. You let Dak gain a little bit of confidence. If Dak can throw a ball, it doesn't even have to be a long pass. Some of Bell's best receptions are on these 3-4 yard runs. All he does, he gets the singled up thing, he makes a quick move to get some space, and then he relies on his acceleration and his footwork. That's great. Zeke, I think, can do the same thing. And if Dallas, if they want to change up their offense, even just a little bit, I'm not even saying change your identity. I'm just saying change up this small little element of what you do. Put Zeke in some kind of formation 3 to 4 times a game, even if he's a decoy half the time. Give me 2 passes his direction, and I promise you will see bigger, better results out of Zeke. It drives me insane that Dallas doesn't understand this. Because for the people who worry about, yeah, he's not running between the tackles, but what are you going to do? You're risking him doing that. You're risking him blowing out his knee or turning an ankle or something like that, going downfield, and then you didn't have to do it because now you've taken him out of his strongest facet and exposed him to injury. Here's my counter to that. Dallas isn't going to be bringing Zeke back. They're not. So if you're also worried about, well, what happens with, if he wants Le'Veon Bell type money, which is to say be paid like a receiver and a running back. Good. Let him. He'll do it elsewhere. Dallas made it clear in 2014 when DeMarco Murray ran for over 1,800 yards, 1,845 yards, and 13 touchdowns, was nearly league MVP. They made it clear that they don't care. They saw him as a 27 going on 28-year-old running back who had a history of injuries and had a lot of wear on the tires. They weren't going to bring him back. The only way they would have brought DeMarco back would have been for a very team-friendly deal, and that wouldn't have been fair to DeMarco. To his credit, he went and he got his money elsewhere, And, I know the Titans just released him today, if you're watching this, March 9th. But it's one of those situations where he got 3 years out of his 5 years paid. So he got his money. Yeah, Philadelphia was a disaster for him, but I digress. DeMarco was a great, great role model in the franchise. He was beloved within the organization and the community of Dallas. It didn't matter. Business is business. They let him walk. Do you really think, with that being the case, that they're going to want to keep Zeke for a second contract? If they can't keep Zeke in check off the field, if they can't keep him from punching DJs in the face or pulling down a girl's top at a St. Patrick's Day parade, do you really think, first of all, that they're going to buy into 4 or 5 more years of that? No, they're not. And then when you add in the mileage and any injuries he might suffer along the way, no, 0 chance. Dallas is going to draft Zeke's successor, whether it's Zeke's last year of his rookie deal or whether it's that offseason after he leaves. They're going to let someone else pay him, and they're going to plug someone else back there because they've already invested over $100 million in that offensive line. So don't worry about the wear and tear on Zeke using this, and don't worry about the financials of it. Get every drop of ability, of potential you can get out of him now while he's not getting paid hardly anything. If you do that, I promise you, you will see greater results for the Dallas offense. So that's the article. Again, I recommend you guys check it out. If you want to support the DallasProspect.com, please go to the website, follow us on social media. You can follow us on Facebook, or actually you follow on Twitter. You follow on Twitter at Dallas Prospect. You can find us and like us on Facebook at The Dallas Prospect. And yeah, if you guys want to join us, man, join us. We are always looking for new contributors. We are seeking to become the biggest and best independent sports entertainment network in Dallas. And to do that, we need to keep finding contributors. We need articles. We need podcasts, video producers, whatever, man. If you got something you can contribute, if you love Dallas sports, hell, if you don't even like sports, in which case I'm wondering why you've stayed with me this long in this video, but don't go anywhere. I love you. We have everything else you need on pop culture. We have games. We have movie reviews. We have comics. We have music. We have television reviews. We cover pop culture as well. So if there's other stuff you want to do, other ways you want to contribute, come in, man, join us. You can contribute in those ways. You're not even bound to a subject. You could come in saying you want to be our Dallas Stars writer. Oh, by the way, you also want to do movies and games. And I would say, fantastic. When can you start? Actually, first let me see a sample piece, but when can you start after that, assuming it's all right? Like, we are all about growing. This whole thing is something where it's just doing what you love, doing the things you like, taking a hobby and making it work for you, keeping it real, honest, and true. Don't forget as well to join us this month, Thursday, March 22nd at Mexico in Plano, Texas. It is a happy hour we're going to be hosting with a live remote and Q&A session as well. It is in Plano, Texas, as I already mentioned, and you can come out, you can watch the happy hour live remote. Drinks will be happy hour pricing the entire night. The event is from 6:30 to 10. But happy hour pricing the whole night. Entrees will be as low as $5 to $6. You'll see Law Nation in attendance, Big Game James of Silver and Blue Nation. You'll also have me, and we have a special guest as well, Computer from 3-6 Mafia. You've probably heard him on The Ticket Fridays at 2:30 with Kid and Computer during the Cowboys season. So yeah, it's going to be a huge event for us. I kind of view this as a launch pad for the website as a whole, for the network as a whole. So come out, guys, join us, support us. We'll have merch. We'll have a drink with you guys. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to do a live show from there. So if you can't join us there, you can watch the stream on YouTube and Facebook. I'm also, don't hold me to this yet, I am also going to try and find a way to stream the show that night, the live remote, on our website. You'll actually have a video feed of the stream. So, until next time, guys, I've been Darreck with the Dallas Prospect. Peace.